Now, I'm not going to tell you whether you should leave your corporate job or not. That is a decision only you can make, and this video isn't going to help you make that decision. This is not career advice. What I want to talk about is how to prepare yourself. It's actually what I've watched make an enormous difference to how your first year of independence actually will go if you decide to go down that path. Because there's a window. It's open right now for you whilst you're still inside a corporate role with a title, you're still backed by an institution, still part of a professional world that you've spent decades building. And that window closes the moment you hand in your notice. Most executives spend months, sometimes years, deciding whether they want to leave or not. That's fine, and that's a real and important decision. But almost all of that thinking goes into the question of whether to go or not. And almost none of the thinking goes into what to build before you leave. The executives I've watched navigate this transition well, the ones that look back on their first year of independence and feel like they actually got somewhere rather than just survived it, they share one thing more than anything else. They have used that window of opportunity. For those who don't know me, my name is Arndt Halbach. Over the last 20 years, I've worked with more than 1,000 senior executives across 60 countries, helping them navigate this exact transition from corporate employment to independent consultancy. I'm also in the process of writing a book about it, which means I've spent a lot of time recently interviewing some of the most successful independent consultants out there, people who are genuinely thriving in the second curve. And when I ask what they wish they had done differently, the answer is almost never about skills or market positioning. It's almost always some version of, oh, I wished I'd made better use of the time I had before I left corporate. I had access to relationships, positioning opportunities, and I didn't do enough with that while I was still in the organization. Now, that connects directly to something I call the second curve, the independent practice you're building as a natural succession to your corporate career. The principle is simple. Your second curve should always start before your first one is on the way down. Ideally, before the role even peaks, when you're still at your most connected and credible within your business and you still have that institutional name behind you. That's when the conditions are almost perfect and in your favor. That's when you should be laying the groundwork for your independent career as an entrepreneur. Now, I know for some and probably most of you, that ideal moment may already be behind you. The role may have already peaked and the decision might feel more urgent than just an option. And that's fine. This video is still exactly for you because the honest message is the same regardless of where you are in the trajectory. Start building now, not after you've made the decision, not after you've handed in your notice or received a letter, but now while the window is still open. Here's what your corporate career is still doing for you right now. Things you've almost certainly stopped noticing. Your title explains who you are. When you reach out to someone on LinkedIn, appear in another company, senior contact, somebody you'd like to meet, that email or that in-mail arrives with an immediately clear context. Oh, there's a senior position at a recognizable company with the credibility that comes with it. And will people read your message through that lens? The moment you go independent, man, that signal disappears. Your history travels with you, yes, but the life context doesn't. And you'll notice that difference almost immediately in how people respond. Your network is also at its warmest right now. The relationships you've built are still active, you're still in the same professional world as the people you know, showing up in the same contexts. So the whole point is, the window is about making the best of that situation before it changes. So what does using the window actually look like for you? There are 4 things really. None of them require you to have made the decision to leave, so don't worry. But if you do them, they'll pay off big time if and when you go independent. Number 1 is get your positioning clear while the stakes are low. One of the hardest things about going independent is answering the question honestly, what do I actually do? Not what's on my CV, but what problem do I solve, for whom, and why me specifically? And inside a corporate role, you have something most independent advisors would give a great deal for: a monthly paycheck and the time to figure this out at your own pace. You can have exploratory conversations, not as someone looking for work, but as someone genuinely curious about how people think and about problems in that area. You can test different framings of your expertise. You can notice what makes people lean forward and go like, oh, interesting, or what makes their eyes glaze over. This experimentation costs almost nothing while you're still employed. Once you're independent and the clock is ticking, every conversation carries the weight of kind of needing to convert into something. And that pressure makes honest exploration for yourself much harder. So start figuring out your positioning now. Write a first draft, share it with 3 or 4 people who will tell you the truth. Number 2, audit your network, and not just your LinkedIn connections, your actual network. The relationships that are warm enough that a call tomorrow would be really welcome. Write down those names. I would encourage you to do a list of 30, 40 or even 50 people, and then ask yourself, okay, of those, who works with the kinds of businesses and problems I want to be working on? Who is likely to move into a position maybe in the next 2 or 3 years where they'd either hire me or they'd be able to refer me? And then, and this is the bit most people skip, make sure those relationships are active before you leave. Have the coffees now, make the calls, reconnect with the intention of just staying connected, not because you need something from them right now. A relationship that's warm on your last day of employment is a referral conversation 12 months later. A relationship that's gone cold needs to be rebuilt from the outside, and that's completely different and much harder. Number 3, gather proof while you're still in the business. Look, the most credible thing you'll be able to tell a potential client are going to be the successes from your corporate career. Those are your war stories. Those will be your kind of case study library items when you go independent. And the further you get away from those stories, the harder they are to capture with the right level of precision. So now is the time to document those stories. Write them down. What was the situation? What you actually did, what changed through your intervention, and what it was worth for the business. Do it in enough detail that you can relay those stories to a prospective clients in 2 years' time. One important note, of course, be careful about confidentiality. This is your own working record, right? It's a factual account of your contribution that you'll be able to speak to specifically later on. And number 4, have an honest conversation about financial runway. So this isn't primarily about the number in your savings account. It's about the psychological contract you need to sign with yourself before you leave. The question isn't how many months of runway do I have? It's more how many months am I genuinely willing and able to operate without it feeling like an emergency? Because those 2 numbers are often very, very different. And the gap between them is where most of the bad early decisions are made. Taking work that's wrong in the practice because the financial pressure is building, discounting your fees because you need the client, expanding scope of the work because you couldn't afford to say no. I've watched those mistakes hundreds of times, and they always trace back to financial pressure and emotional pressure really through that situation. So have the honest conversation right now with yourself, but also with your better half or whoever else in your life needs to be part of that decision. So, of everything I've described in the video so far, there's one thing that matters most. It's knowing with real clarity what specific problem you solve, for whom, and why you specifically. It's not just reciting your career history and the things that you could be doing. It's the one thing you want to be known for as the person in the room when that problem appears with a client. That question has an answer, but finding it takes real time and very honest reflection. And usually it also takes a few difficult conversations with people who will push back on your first answers. But the answer will be found, can be found, but it is significantly easier to find it from the inside of a corporate role where there's no pressure on the answer at the moment than once you're outside the organization, where every version of it needs to be immediately viable. So if you can answer that question clearly before you leave, man, that first year looks genuinely different and much better for you. Your conversations will end better, your network introductions are more productive, and your positioning feels credible because you've had months to test it before anything was really at stake. If you leave the corporate role without answering that positioning questions, as most people do unfortunately, the first couple of months of your independence are partly spent figuring it out under pressure. Which is possible, but it's slower and a lot more stressful than it needs to be for you. None of what I've described today requires you to have made the decision to leave, right? You might go in 3 months, or you might leave the corporate role in 3 years. Or you decide to stay in an employed role until retirement, good for you. But if going independent is something you're genuinely considering, these are the things that determine how it goes. And all of them are much easier to do now than they will be once you've left. So use that window wisely. So if you want to understand what what you're building towards, the complete framework for what a well-constructed independent consulting practice actually looks like, it's in the anchor video on this channel. Everything I've touched on today connects into that framework. Link is in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.